Hello, hello, hello. Hum hai Auraten, Dil Se Desi, a podcast by South Asian American women who dare to raise their voices for South Asian women. Welcome back. This is episode 11. In today's episode, we will be talking to Tejal, who is a therapist specializing in couples therapy and maternal mental health, and a mom of 2 young boys, about some of the challenges facing South Asian parents today. We'll be discussing questions like, what kinds of struggles are South Asian children of these recent generations experiencing? And what it's like to be a South Asian parent today trying to pass on the culture in comparison to how our parents passed it on to us. As I always say, parenting is one huge experiment. No one actually knows what they're doing, and just when you think you've got it all figured out, your kid shows you that you've got it all wrong. Let's listen now to episode 11.
Hello, Orte.
Hello, Orte.
Hello, Auraten.
Hello, Orte.
So today we're joined by our special guest, Tejal. Tejal, welcome back, and thank you for being with Auraten again.
Thank you for having me.
Today's topic is pretty interesting, and Tejal, thank you for bringing this forward, actually. We're going to be talking about the struggles of our South Asian Gen Z that's growing up today. So this is the generation that's sort of born between, 2005 and onwards, 2000 and onwards. So they're the ones that are probably in, kind of around in their 18-year-olds all the way up to our infants even that are growing up in this day and age, growing up with technology all around us, growing up with many screens around us, a lot of different ways of schooling,
COVID,
going through a pandemic.
Yeah, apparently the COVID babies are a different
Internet.
Absolutely
Social media,
right.
internet, growing up in a home where nothing's new. The technology is nothing's new or exciting. It's just accepted. It's part of the norm.
Yeah.
Versus the previous generations remember what it was like to not have something, and then for it to be introduced into the world. Like I remember when Facebook came out. I remember like adding someone as a friend and being in a relationship on Facebook, but for them it's the norm.
And Google.
But yeah, being able to Google anything. If you have a question about something, like just what'd you do? You Google it.
And just even growing up with these sort of interactions, like sending emojis versus actually like having a conversation. Yeah. Just even the modes of communication have changed, right? Like you can send any emoji, like a poop emoji, instead of like saying, I got to go to the bathroom.
All our children who only communicate with you via text.
Right.
And the language has changed too, right? The way that they communicate. AOL first came out. Actually, when IRC, with Internet Relay Chat, was the thing, right? And then after that, AOL came out. And then after that, Messenger came out. And then slowly, language started to change. HRU, ROFL, and all of those things. And now that's progressed to emoticons, right? Emojis.
What was HRU? How are you?
Yes. Yeah. It started with ASL, I think, right? Like the fact that we were using it like A/S/L.
Wasn't that age, sex, location?
Right.
Yes.
But that's how
that was the original.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Geeth, you mentioned something before AOL that I didn't know about.
IRC, I'm older, babe.
What is IRC?
Internet Relay Chat, which came out, which predates everybody. It was a chat module that was created inside MS-DOS. So it was a black screen with green words, basically. That's all you would see.
Before AOL.
Before AOL. And that was the original way for you to chat with people that you no face, no name, no nothing, and they were just tag names. So like I had friends that were named Zakham and Patanikya, and I don't know what I was. I don't remember, but
and then I thought their name was Patanikya because that's a pretty awesome name.
Yeah, that would have been a really cool name, actually.
Yeah, you're like, who are you talking to? Patanikya. But
I think, what we are talking about right now is like, the kinds of struggles that South Asian children of these sort of recent generations, right? Like even if we go into the millennial generation from Gen Z, still very different lives, right? Like we went from TV to screen, like multiple screens, even just in our own generations. So, what kinds of struggles are children of today experiencing in today's world? But then how is it different from the struggles that we had growing up? What were our struggles growing up?
I feel like, as for speaking for myself as a second generation born to immigrants, it was that just for me, I would say, but my parents immigrated in the 70s and 80s, and their focus was to like provide and like survive. And they came here for their opportunities as well as like to provide better opportunities for their children. And in their hyper focus of that, those two goals of like providing and surviving, they weren't thinking about the collateral consequences of raising their children in a country that they weren't familiar with. Like they didn't have that same experience. And so as we tried to find, so they really couldn't relate to us. That was one of the struggles that I felt for my sister and I, and that they couldn't relate or offer guidance in any way because they didn't have a frame of reference. So we were kind of alone in that process. So I definitely felt like that was a struggle of trying to figure that out, which is different for me now raising, and I'm not raising Gen Zers because my children were born after 2015. So that's supposed to be a new generation, but either which way, they're my second generation children. But we have that sort of thing in common. So I would say that was one of our struggles. I can't speak to what it was like for the generations before me, like the Gen Xers.
Yeah. Hey, Gen Xers.
So I want to talk about that. My daughter is 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So her dad and we faced the challenge that every parent for Gen Z faced, which is the internet. Because nobody, even parents who are younger to us, are parenting this generation, did not face it. So Instagram and Snapchat, they're total strangers who our kids can relate to and saying, but they're not kids. So that's the dilemma that most people who are raising Gen Z and Gen I kids face. Like, how do we control it?
Yeah.
We can't have our kids not have any internet because it's the norm.
Right. It's such a utility, right? Like it's ubiquitous right now. The internet is in a lot of parts of the world. Yes, there's some parts of the world that don't have it still, but it is sort of like any other utility, like electricity, right?
And when you ask your 9-year-old or 10-year-old or 11-year-old and say, if a total stranger knocks on your door, are you going to let them in? And they say no. But on internet, when there are these fake accounts and this.
Yeah. Security is an issue for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you help your kids with that? That's the dilemma all of us parents.
And I think, and I spoke to a Gen Xer who has, a teenage son and a daughter who, is a little younger. And so she's going through those same exact things. She's like, sure, they can be on games and they're using social media, but she's like, I cannot control what other people are going to do. And that's the one thing that scares her is that, like, how do we equip our children with the knowledge so they don't struggle with the internet? They can use it the way we use it as a utility without it harming them either. Right. And I think that those are some of the scarier parts of the internet, the dark spots of the internet, I guess I should say. But
agreed.
Even if we think about our own struggles, I mean, what was it like? The tape would stop working and our VHS tapes would stop working and we'd have to pop it out and like trying to rewind it and stuff. Like, we had like these manual issues.
I think some of our issues started similarly with strangers meeting strangers. I mean, we were the beginning of that generation, I think. I mean, we were the beginning of that interaction. In our generation, there was a lot of people that were, because this internet really chat that I'm talking to you about was actually local. It started off with like inter-college chat, like on an intranet, and then you meet up with these random people. You're meeting up with them. So that started back in my generation, which I think like, and then you guys too, right? You guys were meeting people that you randomly met on the internet, weren't you?
For sure. So let me ask you this, like, what were the struggles for you growing up? Like, and this is obviously a little before technology, so before IRC.
I mean, I had cultural problems growing up.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Right?
yeah, that's part of it, right?
Yeah, I had major cultural problems. I went to Catholic school, and my parents were staunch Hindus. So it was a very difficult journey for me that way because it was always in question. I mean, I was starting to feel I had to be part of religion class when I went to Catholic school. So I had to attend and I had to attend Mass. So both things had to happen. And so I was attending religious school and I was attending Mass, but I wouldn't pray because I was like, this is not my God. And I said that to the teacher and I got reprimanded. And I got detentions and I became a target for them because they didn't like the fact that I wasn't bowing down to their God. And slowly, the teachers just stopped liking me or would pick on me because of that. Like, you know, that one thing that I was rejecting their belief system. So that was a struggle. I coming back home and telling my mom about it. And my mom was like, yes, Berta, you're doing the right thing. Yeah, but I'm the one facing the music outside.
Yeah.
You know?
That was always a struggle, like of just feeling like you're out of place, right? I think growing up, at least kids today there's an increase of South Asians within like US, for example. And so we're seeing a lot more South Asians joining schools and stuff. So our kids are growing up with a lot more people from their own communities as well.
Yeah, I was very thankful that my parents actually started going to the temple because where I was living, there was like very few brown families and far between. We would see them like once in a month or something. There was some event that would happen and I'd see other brown people. But like in school, they were just these random token 1 or 2 people. And most of the time we were pitted against each other, so we never talked to each other, you know, because it was like the brownie versus the brownie. Well, who's going to get the higher mark? That kind of crap.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful for the identity that I got from going to a temple, for example. And I got to meet other people that were like me, brown, and believed the same things. And, you know, it was easier in that way. So my struggles were that. My struggles were never really with internet and stuff at all.
Yeah. I think the fact that just kids these days are growing up with technology in their hands, and that's the way of their worlds. Whereas for us, it was never our way of the world, right?
No.
Like we see it, I think we definitely see it as like, oh, this useful technology that can do all these things for us. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think this generation sees it and it's kind of like, well, yeah, why wouldn't it be there?
Arm.
Yeah, it's a norm.
Yeah. They're also a generation of instant gratification, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Like we come from the times when, you know, deliveries meant 3 weeks. We come from the times when food delivery was not a thing. And like you would have to go and pick up the food from the restaurant.
Right. Like pizza was like the most that got delivered, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like I told you that now the kids quote you Google.
Yeah, they quote you through Google.
They say, Mom, it is a myth. Google says that. And then you have to like, how are you going to, or they say, humans are stupid. Google has the right answers.
Yeah, well, who put Google there, right?
So the parents of this generation,
And I think
we have to do more research and we have to come up with smart answers that are not.
So basically,
Google-based.
parents are basically competing with Google today. Of, you know,
as
like
are doctors, lawyers, engineers, and everybody
right.
else.
Exactly. Like
Therapists.
What they're seeing on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram is basically that's where they're getting their information from.
Yeah.
And so I'm
I have
sure.
clients.
Yeah. Tejal,
Like in your mindset, can I just
sorry.
say, wasn't this the mindset when we were growing up as well? I'm not trying to take away. I do recognize that there are legitimate problems and legitimate struggles
Differences.
that children today are facing. But I feel like it's just an extension of what we always were. Like even when we were younger, if my parents spoke, oh please, they don't know what they're talking about. I didn't have Google, but it was just like, they don't know what they're talking about.
I have clients as a therapist who will come to me and say like, oh, I saw this on TikTok. Like, and some of them will be like, I know this sounds weird, but like they'll give me like a clarifier, but that's where they're getting their information about in mental health. And some of it's like it's perfectly legit and it's great. And it's nice to explore and process, but at the same time, if if it falls into the wrong hands or it's misinterpreted, and it goes back to what Geeth was saying of that instant gratification. What I was going to say earlier about being like a Gen Xer, an older millennial, or a first gen maybe immigrant, was that all of the above had some degree of feeling like an outsider. And we have all in some way felt stranded sort of between two worlds. And the second generation and I'm speaking to the ones that are being raised by first gen, or like my experience as a mom, is that they feel like a sense of belonging, like this innate sense of belonging that I didn't have, that I had to figure out, that I had to acquire.
Yeah. Do you think that had a lot to do with the fact that our parents, being first generation, that they had missed home so much that like they had sort of instilled that same sense of home in us as well, that like this home, yes, you were here, but your real home is like back in India or Pakistan.
They never assimilated.
Yeah.
Right. I'm agreeing with you.
And I think part of them didn't want to, right? They wanted to like hold on to that. Yeah.
They never wanted to. It was always like, this is this temporary place where I'm staying and I'm going to go back there. And that's your real home. Right?
And that temporary and air quotes.
Temporary was a lifetime.
They came here acting like visitors. So they never really assimilated. They never really kind of got into, they never upnowed, I want to say, like the American culture. And for us, it's just who we are. Right? So like Tejal having a child today has a sense of like, this is home. Not the way that my father saw it at all. No. So if you're always behaving like a visitor, you don't assimilate. That's what you're passing on to your kids. I mean, you're that insecurity that you're always second,
Yes, that you don't belong. Like
that you don't belong.
Right.
Yeah. And you have to work harder because you don't really, like, do you deserve to be here?
Right.
So growing up here, and, we all can attest to this, growing up here, we had kind of a barrage of culture, right? Like everything you had to absorb about being brown. And I'm interested in finding out from Tejal, actually, like what parts of the culture are you picking and choosing to expose your kids to? What are you giving importance?
So I guess I would say that the way my parents passed it on, and then like what I'm kind of taking from that. And I think I get a little like, I go through ebbs and flows of being really intense and intentional about it. And then telling myself, because, parenting is an experiment, and then backing off for a bit and being like, okay, I think I'm doing a good job. So I guess when it came to my parents, and I was actually talking to my mom about this today, they passed it on in the only way that they knew how. And it was like, it was through language, it was through food and religion. And it was in the way that they named us, like back in those days. I mean, like today, would you ever hear of an Ashit or a Hardik? Probably not.
Probably not.
So I'd imagine the parents of someone born after 1995 would have like the wherewithal. And that was one of the things I wanted my children to have, names that they could easily explain to someone else how to say. I was very intentional about that, but I also wanted them to have South Asian ethnic names. So that was like something I wanted to pass on. I didn't want to like do a in between, like a J or an AJ or something like that. That was really, really important to me. Not that there's anything wrong with those names, or Hardik or Ashit either. They're fine too. But I would say that for what I try to do, because I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, is I try to decide what's important. And so like for me, food's important. So like 3 times a week to 4 times a week, they have like dal chawal and like Indian food. So it's something I wanted to pass because I didn't really enjoy that growing up, but I know how important it is. So and then we have something our parents didn't have, is that I can outsource. So if I want to teach them Hindi, I can have a Hindi teacher. It doesn't have to fall on me. That wasn't something our parents had, because they wouldn't, they'd be like, I'm teaching you, why would I? So that's been huge. Pop culture, Bollywood is one of the ways they sort of pass that. And then we have a lot of other stuff at our fingertips. If I decide that I want to do tabla lessons, you find a tabla teacher. It's a lot of the same stuff that I think we had growing up. Just, I think our generation in general is pretty good about outsourcing.
How do you feel about language?
Language is a tough one because I speak a dialect that there's only 100,000 speakers, and it's really important to my dad that my kids know the language, or the dialect, I should say. But I had to really think about, is that because to him that's how the culture gets passed. That is really, really important to him. And so, but for me, I had to think about it. Is this really important to me, or do I just not want to disappoint him? And I had to process that and figure that out. And I realized it was like a better way to do it, that it made more sense to teach the broader language, which is Hindi, which is what my husband speaks, their dad. And so we're going to go with the Hindi, and obviously English is a default. And when it comes to my specific cultural background, I can teach that in a different way. I don't have to do it through language. When they're older and they understand that is something that's really important to me that they know. But I'm gonna forego teaching them the dialect.
It's funny. My dad also, like, that was a big thing in our house. Like, the minute we would walk home, he'd be like, "You got to speak in Urdu. You cannot speak in English at home." And so he forced us to speak in Urdu at all times. And obviously at the time I was like, whatever. And I'd like talk to my sister in French because we were both taking French.
Yeah.
And so we would get by like that, have like secret conversations. But it was, at the time I would get really mad. I'd be like, no, I want to speak in English. Like, why do we move to America then? Like, if you're not going to, if you're not going to speak the language here, then what's the point? But now as an adult, as a 40-year-old, I'm like, thanks, Dad. Thank you for doing that for me, because I can actually like hold a conversation in Urdu now.
Same.
And also understand if people are talking about me.
I actually appreciate the fact that my parents taught me all my dialects. So, I mean, I'm fluent in Sindhi, I'm fluent in Hindi, and then I taught myself Urdu and whatever. So I'm very happy that I am able to converse in the language in multiple scenarios.
That's what I tell my daughter. I think it's important for parents to pass on their language to their kids, especially in America, because we only grow up with one language.
And I think, and I feel like, I enjoy listening to, I'm glad I was speaking Urdu at home because I could listen to the songs. I could watch Bollywood movies and I could understand everything that was going on. And I think it's interesting, like now, kids are watching Miss Marvel, for example, and they're seeing like themselves represented on screen, which is really lovely, right? Like that we're seeing more and more South Asian representation, even in like on screen, which is really helpful for the children growing up in today's day.
It's well worth thinking about, though. It is worth thinking about. Like, I can see where Tejal's dilemma is, because she's right. Like, had I not known Sindhi, what would I really have missed out on? I question, like, what was I... Because it's not... I mean, I love the fact that I know the language, but I mean, in the big picture of things, I look at people that are just stuck speaking Sindhi, and it's like you're missing out on so much. Like, they don't want to speak any other language, and they only want to communicate in this one regional language, which doesn't... It's not international. You can't communicate anything with the greater world. So that's the flip side to that is like, if you think about it as an American mother, the two most important pressing languages probably English, which he's learning anyway, the national language. Makes sense. The nice thing about that is that you can communicate with people who can't and learn more about your culture, right? Like, a lot of the times kids will come across students that are like immigrants coming from other countries that aren't well spoken in English, but are very comfortable speaking in their home dialect. I mean, their home language, whatever, Urdu, Hindi. And they get to learn from them.
I really appreciated our parents even, celebrating holidays, like ordering our shalwar kameezes, right? So like even through outfits and clothes, we were practicing our culture.
I hated the fact that my mom made me wear these Indian outfits. There was a little time in between that I loved it. And then there was a time where I was just like, please stop. This is so unnecessary. But she would make me, and she still bothers me about it now. But I appreciate that, because that is a part of the culture that I get to kind of say, okay, that's my culture, right? So, and I appreciate, the photos of little boys and girls in Indian outfits too, when I'm looking online, and I'm like, oh, look, he's wearing a shalwar kameez. So cute.
They're so cute. I love it. That's one of the things that people really love about our culture, and like in general, like even outsiders just like Like I'll be someplace and some, Caucasian woman will be like, "Are you Indian? I went to an Indian wedding once." I can't wait to the next time I'm gonna tell a Gora person I went to a Gora wedding once.
I think I have done that.
You should, yeah, because it's like, why are you announcing this to me?
The othering.
And I think it's lovely that, like, yes, and with YouTube now being like the go-to source for like kids watching or TikTok, like they're learning like South Asian dance moves that, we grew up watching like Bollywood movies. That's where we were learning our dance moves. And now it's like they're learning it from like these amazing dancers. And it's lovely that like there's so much more absorption of culture going on now because of the internet.
And that's the positive side to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like the flip side.
I have a question now, right?
Okay.
Do you compare yourself to your parents? Like how they raised you versus how you are raising your children?
I made a conscious and intentional decision a long time ago that I wasn't going to do that. So I don't compare myself to my mother-in-law or my mom as a wife. And therefore I don't compare myself to my mom or anyone else or my parents as a parent.
Okay, and it's safe to say then that if you're doing this and you're comfortable with it, there's no guilt.
There's no guilt. And if I get here, and my parents have pretty good boundaries in that regard, and they don't say anything to me. I mean, in the couple times they may have made like an input about like a pacifier early on, or the way I decided to do certain things, they quickly refrained and were like, "Okay, Tejal knows best."
So how did you get to that point where you were able to get them to say, "Okay, Tejal knows best," for advice for other moms who may be feeling guilt or maybe struggling with like their parenting style versus their parents' parenting style? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Well, I guess I would say is like when I started to realize that any guilt that I was feeling was robbing my joy. Like if I was feeling guilty, because I'm not saying that like I'm some like Mahaan being that never felt any of these emotions or anything like that. I've definitely been there where I'm like, I could be doing things better. My mom wouldn't have done this. She would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, make a full course meal, Indian meal, and then go to work for the day. Like I'm screwing that up. I'm effing up here.
That was their definition of Mahaan Auraten.
Yes, right. And I don't do that. I wake up when my children wake up. Mahaan Auraten. That's when you guys upgrade. Yes. So anyway, so that being said, I was like, and then I was like, that's not me. That's not who I want to be. I don't want to, and I'm not enjoying the present. And I'm like, and that it's okay to feed your kids like French fries for dinner or microwave the dal from Costco because we have that now. Like, so why am I doing this to myself? And I'd rather do the shortcut method and spend time with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I enjoying this? And so that's where, when I realized my guilt was robbing me my enjoyment of things, and I was stressing myself out, was when I was like, I can't do this. I need to. And I realized how much more at peace I was when I let go.
I think we also recognize the fact that we wish our parents would have spent more time with us rather than doing things for us. Yeah. And you're making up that gap, Yeah.
And I don't want to, and I didn't want to, from that angle of like, I want to do the things that they didn't do. Like I want to do the things that they didn't give me. Like I didn't, and I didn't want to say that to make them sound like terrible people. They were just doing what they thought was best in the best way they knew how. Yeah. And so from that angle, as I raise these Gen Alpha, whatever they're going to be called, I'm like, okay, let's do this. But like, and I told the story earlier, but like, I took my 6-year-old to the Indian store to pick up some stuff. Yeah. And he goes, "This smells." Like 6-year-old me in the 1980s, early 90s would have gotten a Tupperware sandwich.
Hell yeah. Like, shut up.
But I validated what he said. And I was all like, yeah, it smells. There's a lot of spices and it smells in here all, in one spot. This is a closed space and we live in a hot area. It smells.
I would have been like, "Beta, you're going to love those smells when you're at a certain time in your life." Those same smells that I hated, I love now.
Yeah, but the fact that we would walk to school and smelling like onions half the times, oh my God. And now I'm like, I don't even care anymore. I'm like, I smell really good. Smells like
I
biryani.
smell like desi food that you guys spend $100 to eat.
Right. And I'm sure this like white person that's like walking down the street probably will recognize it too. I'll be like, oh, biryani kaithi isne.
I took a Gora friend in graduate school to Gatti Roll in New York. And after we ate Gatti Roll together, he loved it. He bought a toothbrush and toothpaste at the local Dwayne Reed.
And brush his teeth.
And brushed his teeth and like thoroughly washed his hands. And he's like, how do you get this smell off of you? And I was all like, what smell?
Beta, it becomes a part of your blood.
I'm just like, what are you talking about? This smell is incredible. I want to smell this all day.
So that's the lesson you should have given Avian. You should have been like, Beta, these are the smells that you're going to grow to love. This is your identity.
This is the smell. I was like, just own the smell. This is our smell, okay?
And I do think the other thing that really kind of changes for our parents to like the next generation of parents, like Tejal, you and Amna, same with you too. I think the fact that our parents come here, when they move out of their countries, they're coming here in like that survival mode. They're like, we got to do this, right? Like, we got to save money. This is like, your education is really serious. Like, you cannot like, you know, I was like, oh, I want to play the violin. Like, you got to concentrate on your studies. And so everything for them was about like just, you know, excelling and getting a job. And, you know, it was very like sort of driven from that survival mindset.
College is also no joke here, right? Like, it's not like in India and Pakistan where it's a couple of hundred rupees, 1,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees. Not that big of a deal in India and Pakistan to come up with, but here it's like thousands of dollars. In some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, you know, like they're like, yeah, no, that violin lesson that I'm going to spend $400 is going to your college fund. Shut up.
Right. And plus, like, free education in the U.S., right? Like, that was a new thing for us, too. Like, my parents were like, what? We don't have to pay for education? Right? So, like, I think even that it is subjective, right? Like, someone back home in Pakistan and India that, like, just doesn't have the means for that education. They're not going to be able to pay that lakh or hazard or anything like that either, right? So they're, like, sort of shut out of luck at that point. But free education here is, like, that's such an amazing thing for immigrant parents coming here, who are in that survival mindset going, oh, shit.
Yeah, and even those parents that don't believe that education is a thing or importance of education come to this country, realize that they have access to free education, then they want you to harness that. They want you to take advantage of that because they come here and realize that had they been educated or had they had higher degrees, they would have done better, or that they have higher degrees and that's why they're doing better, right? So they want to push the education part on their kids too.
Right, because they never had free access to free education, right? And even in their own days.
Right, yeah.
And I do think that like parents often, you know, I have older siblings as well. I have nieces and nephews, and I think I'm definitely seeing them raising their children very differently, where they're seeing these like sort of extracurricular activities as like, no, I'm going to invest in this child's like curiosity, because I want them to explore all these other things, right? That I didn't get a chance to do. But Amna, do you think that you're still raising your child differently than how your parents raised you?
Obviously,
right?
Because I grew up in a country where there was cultural norms. Girls are different than boys, and here too they are. But yet we brought up. Yeah. I did what I could to raise a child without gender norms. Because I grew up with gender norms.
And I think that's a huge thing, right? Like, I think a lot of kids today, even in school, are learning about what does it mean to be LGBTQ, right? Like, what is gender identity and sexual orientation? And I think that's really great that they're getting that education so much sooner. I mean, I wish we would have gotten that.
Yeah.
We would have been like not as homophobic growing up, or not as like just
clueless,
rude, or even sexist. And, you know, even I was sexist, right? Like growing up, because that's all you heard around you.
I felt like we were clueless almost. I remember, you know, I don't know if you guys remember the show Three's Company. Yeah, with like the guy that lived with two girls, right?
Yeah.
Like
Ritter. What was his
Jack
name?
Ritter. Yeah. So the whole plot of the show was that they had to pretend that he was gay, so therefore he could live with these two women, because it wasn't allowed for like a heterosexual straight man to live with two women at that time. Yeah. So I kept asking my parents what gay was. And we'd watch this show every day, and they would be like, "Oh, he's just happy," and then get all weird. And I was all like, "Wait, are you telling me there's a whole show based on the fact that this guy is happy?" This is really strange.
I think that's the same definition that I got, Tejal. That's pretty phenomenal. I think
Actually,
I
I've
get the
asked a
same.
lot of brown kids this, and they've said the same thing. Like their parents would just be like, he's happy," and I'm like, "You made a show
What?
about a happy person? Like, I
Yeah.
don't get it."
I don't get it. Yeah, I think that was the same thing that I got when I said gay, which is funny because gay, the other meaning for gay is happy. So if you look at it in a dictionary,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
it says, which is pretty,
Yeah.
props to the Desi parents.
Right.
But
They were like, "Vocabulary. This is a vocabulary lesson."
they just did a twist on vocabulary and got it off their
Yeah.
backs. But
Right.
it's funny.
I think so. Tejo, so you just mentioned, the fact that like when you ask your parents,
and
so
that-
what if your children
It's
ask
different.
you
I would
that, like,
explain it.
how
Gay
is that
means
different for you?
like when two people, like a boy and a boy, like each other, or a girl and a girl like each other, and I would do it. And actually, speaking of, we were looking at a house recently, about a year ago. My son was 5, who's 6 now, and the guy showing us the house was moving to Ohio. So my husband was asking like why he was moving. And the guy said, "Oh, my husband got a job in Ohio and we heard good things about it, and, like the city or whatever we're going to. So we're leaving." And my 5-year-old turns to him, and it's that parenting moment where you like the time freezes for a second because you don't know what he's going to say. And he goes, "Where's your husband?" And the guy goes, "Oh, he's at yoga class." And my son goes, "Oh, I do yoga." That was it. Just like he was just wanted to know where this other person that lives in the house was. That's all.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
That's what I love
Yeah.
about this generation.
Yeah. They value diversity and they like think, they see it as like a strength.
Even their cultural identification and the way they want to brown kids, that way they accept who they are.
Right.
I wonder if all the generations before us said the same thing. Like if my
Yeah.
parents looked at my generation and said, "Wow."
Never. I don't think they.
My parents were like, my parents were
Yeah.
probably like, "Fail."
I don't think they were that happy. Do
I
that.
would say that, like, for parents that are nowadays raising kids, whether you're raising like a Gen Zer or you're raising whatever comes after that, like a younger child, but I think reframing and like accepting that there isn't a blueprint on how to do this, as like Geet says, parenting is one big experiment. So like I used to take this intense pressure of educating them about their cultural background. I felt like I was like Alex Trebek on like Hindu Jeopardy. And I'm not pioneering this endeavor by any means. Like, like Amna has been parenting a lot longer than I have. There's many people that have come before me and that will come after me. But I just wish that there was like some camp I could send them to where they would come back like with that part immigrant hustle and part American entitlement. And my fear is that they won't have that same hustle because they didn't have the same adversity.
You could send
and
them
if that
to
makes sense.
Gitu.
I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I could do that because you would do that. You would give them that hustle. And so, but I'm kind of envious of other ethnic backgrounds. Whose like migration story to America was like over 100 years ago, and then there's like more of a flow chart, or maybe there's no flow chart. They just forgot about everything. But something like if my child says like I don't know about Hindu gods, then I like send them to like some Sanskriti camp, which is I guess is going to be Gita Bua camp.
I'm telling you, send them to me. I'm
Next
the
time
answer.
I will send them. I will put a
Yes.
tag on their head
Yes.
and be like, "Find Geet Janani. Don't call me."
Yeah.
Pindas, don't call me.
Send me your kids. I will teach them a whole bunch
I'll
of
call you.
Hinduness.
And so when you're ready, she'll send it back.
It's a process. We grow with our kids and we see what works and what doesn't work. And we go with our own process. And that's my message of raising kids in this culture, is to be tolerant and patient and to be open.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Amna. Yeah. I think all of us can be patient. We all have young people in our lives. So half of us are even like Geet. I think you and I are sort of like the guardians of some of the young people in our own lives, right? Like, but I think just having this conversation and helping all of us understand that, parents today are struggling and that's okay, right? Like not everyone has it figured out. Tejal, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing just even your experiences as a mom. with younger kids right now who are sort of, they're learning from you, right?
Thank you.
Trying
Tejal.
over here.
Thank you,
Thank you
Tejal.
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amna.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Auraten. Mahaan Auraten.
And that brings episode 11 to an end. Thanks for tuning in. With a new episode each week, you'll journey with Auraten through inclusive intergenerational conversations about the identities and experiences of brown women that tap into our South Asian roots in India and Pakistan. Auraten may get heavy at times as we process trauma and discuss challenges with patriarchy, misogyny, and sexism in our community. Sometimes you'll laugh out loud with us as we share personal stories. You may even feel uncomfortable when the discussion gets heated and we drop a gali or curse word. Matlab sorry, but not sorry. For more information on Auraten, please visit our website at www.auraten.com, or you can visit us on Facebook or Instagram at 3AURATEN. We're always open to hearing any stories that you'd like to share, even if they have to be anonymous. Let us know by private message or by email. This is Geet signing off.